Miami Dolphins, the former head coach Brian Flores filing a class action lawsuit against the NFL and the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants and his former team, the Dolphins. And this kind of came out of nowhere when you think about it. Go back to a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was around 9:40 Eastern time, and I didn't think that Brian Flores' job was in jeopardy, and then he got fired. Other guys were being fired. Brian Flores at one point won 7 games in a row for the Dolphins. And I'm thinking, Brian Flores is out in Miami, then maybe Stephen Ross is going to bring in Jim Harbaugh. And then all of a sudden, Brian Flores is going to get all these interviews. You know, everybody wants to line up for Brian Flores. He's going to be the hot ticket, Giants, the Bears. And then nothing happened. And then all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute. Is Brian Flores going to get a job here? Well, Bears hired their guy. He's not going to get the job in Denver. He's supposed to interview for the Giants. Well, then that's when things went sideways. Now, the Giants were going to interview him, but apparently they had already hired their head coach, Brian Daboll. It was the Rooney Rule. He didn't know it until Bill Belichick, his former coach with, he was on his staff there with New England, his former boss, texted him, and he texted the wrong Brian. This is Brian Flores on his text with Bill Belichick.
I interviewed for the Giants position. I was set to interview on Thursday, the Monday prior. Before I interviewed, I received a text message from Bill Belichick saying congratulations on the Giants, essentially congratulations on the Giants job. There was a little bit of back and forth. And
some confusion because you haven't sat down with the Giants yet.
I have not sat down with the Giants. There was some back and forth, and I asked him, are you talking to the right Brian? As you've seen through the text messages, he was actually thought he was texting Brian Daboll,
who they ended up hiring.
Yes, sir.
And then the Giants said, look, we hired the more qualified guy. No, you didn't. Brian Flores has been a successful NFL coach for 2 years. Brian Daboll won 7 games. He had ownership that reportedly wanted him to tank games. To me, that's the more qualified candidate. He's been a coach. He was winning games in an organization that didn't want him to win games. That's how much he cared about winning. So you can't say Brian Daboll is more qualified than Brian Flores. And then, after he found out it was a fake interview, I think that's when he decided, look, I've had enough. And I talked to a source this morning, I said, what does Brian Flores want out of this lawsuit against the NFL? And my source said, he's a guy of principle. That was the word that kept coming up, principle. This is just about the principle of it. You gave me a sham interview. You were never interested in hiring me. And he's probably going to put his coaching career is going to be on hold. It may not ever materialize again. Owners may be afraid to hire him with what could happen. But he decided to file the lawsuit. And then he also claims that his former owner, Stephen Ross, offered him $100,000 for every loss in 2019. Every loss. That's a specific number. Now, it's not a good look for the league that's gone all in on legal sports gambling. I also talked to a source this morning about this, same source. And I said, what matters more to the NFL? They said, well, look, the hiring practices, they know that's an issue. That's why they created the Rooney Rule. The bigger issue is Stephen Ross paying, this is fixing games. Fixing games to lose. $100,000 for every loss. Can you prove it? Did Brian Flores maybe tell his assistant coaches, hey, they want us to lose? Is the GM involved? Stephen Ross is going to be deposed. Going to ask him. This is where you lose your team. That's fixing games. I want you to lose. I'm going to incentivize you to lose games. But if the reports turn out to be true, the lawsuit has potential to shed some light on the dark side of the NFL. And maybe we're going to look back on Brian Flores in 20 years and treat him the way we did Curt Flood, Major League Baseball. There's other guys who are waiting to see if they're going to be interviewed. Eric Bieniemy, I said this a couple of weeks ago. I don't think he's going to get a job because the Vikings were supposed to be the team. And then it felt like they were waiting to see if Jim Harbaugh really wanted to coach in the NFL, and Eric Bieniemy probably not going to get a job. David Culley with the Texans got fired after 1 year. Brian Flores after 2 years. And this is where the African-American coaches are saying, we don't get a second chance. We don't get an extended first chance. And that's the problem that they have. And if you're going to interview us, then interview us. Don't bring us in and all of a sudden you go, I got to check the box here. The reason why the Rooney Rule came up is because they did have a problem. They do have a problem. That's why they created this. But, the Giants say they have the more qualified candidate. They didn't. The Rooney Rule is there. Stephen Ross with the possibility of being deposed and having to talk about this or deny this. Where is this trial going to be held? That's a big deal. What's the forum going to be? The access. Are you going to depose Bill Belichick? I mean, this is a whole lot bigger than, just one guy taking on the NFL. I was also told by a source the lawyers that Brian Flores hired are well respected. They are great. Now, NFL is full of lawyers. But if you have all this information, if you collected this information, if there's a paper trail, this is what happens. The NFL, are they going to settle? Will Brian Flores settle? They settled with Kaepernick. They're going to settle here. You don't want to go in and have your owner deposed. You don't want the commissioner. You don't want John Elway with the Broncos. No, you don't want that. But if you're Brian Flores, how far are you taking this? What do you want out of this? But he's been making the rounds, and it certainly sounds like, he's all in because it might be career suicide. But in his mind, hey, somebody has to do this. And I was texting with Tony Dungy last night, and I said, is this going to matter? Is this, something that's going to be helpful to the big picture? And Tony sadly says, probably not. It's exposing it. But I was told once again, the NFL is more concerned about that gambling. they're all in on gambling. You cannot have this. Like one owner, it's not worth it. You got to say to Stephen Ross, Stephen, if this is true, you're gone. You're going to, put it up for sale. Donald Sterling lost, his ownership of the Clippers for just being a racist. He lost it. That's when Adam Silver came in and said, you're gone. And here we go. Who wants it? There'd be a lot of people who want to buy the Dolphins. But, that's just some of the stuff that's happening right now.